We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully your day is going well. It is Wednesday. Still have the cold, but it's a lot better now. Hopefully it'll be over with soon. I wanted to tell you about a couple of things before we got started. You know, I'll get DMs and emails and that sort of thing. And I got one that was interesting. Now, 99.9% of the emails and DMs I get are very positive, very supportive. And I'm appreciative of that. I block so many Trumplefucks, I don't get much negative anymore. Occasionally I do. But then there's always somebody who will send something to me and it starts out nice and they'll throw some bullshit in the end. And I don't take offense to it. I find it rather funny. It gives me something to talk about. And I got a DM yesterday that was interesting. First thing they say, "Hey, Mike, I love you. I love your content. I love the podcast. I love your TikToks. And I'm glad to hear that your cold is getting better. But," there's always a fucking but. "But if your cold doesn't get better, why don't you just run some best of?" I get what you're saying. You know, listening to a guy with a cold probably isn't the greatest thing in the world, but try being the guy with the fucking cold and try to talk for an hour. That's some shit. But here's the deal. I can't play a best of. There is no best of, because what I do here on the podcast has a shelf life. If I was to go back, say, a week from now and play the podcast I did a week ago, it would be irrelevant. It would be out of date. The expiration date would have passed. That's the problem with doing what I do here. A lot of people who do podcasts, you can go back 2 months, 2 years, and listen to their shit. But if you do that with mine, it's of no value. You know, save for a couple special ones like with the Trumplefucks and shit. But even those are out of date at that point. So I'm sorry you have to tough your way through listening to me with a cold. And as I said, eventually it gets better, and I'm getting better now. So let's not worry about it. I wanted to bring something else up because somebody asked me a question, and it's kind of inappropriate, and not in a mean way. I think it was just out of curiosity as to what I think. And frankly, on this topic, what I think doesn't matter. And I've had people ask me about this before. There are some creators on TikTok and in the podcast that have a bunch of things they're selling, whether it be a merch store or they're on Patreon and they make you pay a couple dollars to listen to their podcast. Now, as far as I'm concerned, you do you, I'll do me, and that's just the way it goes. There's a mutual on TikTok of mine, Hawk, who's delving deeply into this. He's got a merch store. Checked it out. It's pretty cool. He's doing a podcast now, and he's going to have a couple podcasts that require a fee to listen to the podcast. And again, Hawk is incredibly popular, and he's gone through some shit. Like, for example, some of the Trumplefucks out here cost him his job. He got fired, and now he's got to hustle and make some money. So I don't begrudge him that at all. And some people ask me, "Are you going to do that?" And the absolute answer is fucking no. No, I'm not going to do that. Nothing like that. Like I say, I don't begrudge Hawk for doing that. If he can do it and he's successful with it, good on him. He's taking the initiative and doing it himself and making some money and telling the man to fuck off. I'm down with that. No question about it. So I'm happy that he's doing that. I hope it's successful for him. He's a good guy, and I like his stuff. I don't always agree with what he does or how he does it, but that doesn't matter. I have the choice to listen or not, and wish him the best. Other people I've known who have done podcasts, get a little popular, and they say, "I'm going to go on Patreon and make people pay for it." And again, if that works for you, fine, but I'm not doing that. Under any circumstance am I doing that. For you as the listener or the viewer, I only ask one thing from you, and that's your attention. And you've given me your attention, and I appreciate it. Now, that's not to say I'm not capitalistic. If someone comes along and say, "I like to do an ad," as long as it's something I agree with and something that's not too intrusive, yeah, I might do that. But the fact of the matter is I'm fortunate. I don't have to do that. I don't have to figure out a way to make money with TikToks or whatever. TikTok pays me a little bit with the TikToks, and they fucking should, because they're benefiting from it. And they're benefiting from it because you're watching. You're watching it because you want to watch me. So TikTok should fucking pay. But you should not pay in regards to me. What I don't understand is, for me, when somebody asks me this, I go, what the fuck am I going to do? I do an hour podcast every day, don't charge anybody, don't want to charge anybody. What could I possibly do beyond what I'm doing that would make it valuable for somebody to pay me money, other than they might feel sorry? Well, you don't have to feel sorry for me. I'm fine. I'm cool. I'm doing this to hopefully have an impact on the country and people, and trying to inform them better. I'm doing it for my own ego, I guess, and a little bit of a revenge. As I told you, when I left my radio station, I told them, fuck you, I'm going to go on the internet and do better than you do at your radio station. And I accomplished that. So I'm happy. I'm happy as a fucking lark. Some people have asked me about merch. I don't have any merch. Before I even do anything with merch, here's a couple things three things I would do if I did merch. First of all, I got to come up with a decent logo. What you see on the podcast and stuff is something I went on Fiverr and paid them $50 to do. It's not a logo. I'd have to have a logo, and I'd have to have a specific logo in mind, something that's very simple, classic, and kind of retro, given that we're all old here. And I've talked to some people about it. I've just never really pulled anything out. If I did a merch store, it would be just a few things. I wouldn't have a whole catalog of shit. That's not what I'm going to do. And secondly, I'm not going to put ridiculous prices on it. It would be as cheap as I could possibly do it, still make a couple pennies and cover whatever expenses. But, when you do anywhere from 5 to TikToks a day, and you do an hour podcast every day, not a lot of time to fuck around with that. And since I don't need to do it, I'm not really worried about it. So for those of you asking about that, you thought I was going to rip Hawk about it? Not. We've all had to hustle. We've all had to do things. He does a good job. He has a big audience. If he can do it, I'm happy for him. Am I going to do it? No. No. Because as I've said, for me, and it's just me, not everybody else. Everybody else has different circumstances. For me, all I want from you is your attention. And you give me plenty of attention. And you give me emails. And you come on my show. I've already asked enough from you. I'm not going to charge anybody money for doing what I'm doing. I'm amazed that you follow along and keep listening. And I'm not going to push that issue. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, so you keep doing what you're doing. Anyway, so that's the answer to that. And as far as the previous person giving me that shot, I'm not even mad about that. I don't even know that they meant it to be mean, but nonetheless, I'm not going to play best of, because there are no best of. Hopefully the best of is the last one I did. Now, that's not always the case. That's one of the things. When I used to do traffic reports, and I did them every 10 minutes, somebody said to me, if you do a bad report, does that bug you? I go, not really. And they said, why not? And I said, well, because in 10 minutes, I can redeem myself and do a good one. Same thing with the podcast. Same thing with TikToks. I can do one. If it's not up to my standards, what the hell, I'll move on and I'll do the next one and hopefully redeem myself. This is, I try to keep this as uncomplicated as possible. I try to do as much of it all myself as I can. There's no editing, there's no bullshit, there's nothing crazy. It's just me talking, and that's the way it's going to stay, and it's going to be free. No matter what I do, there's nothing I can imagine that I could do that would warrant charging you something. Now, I have one caveat to that. On my podcast, on the audio podcast, I didn't even know about this. Apparently, there's an option to subscribe and pay a little money for the podcast. I've never asked you to do that, won't ask you to do that. I don't want you to do it, in fact. But there is one person who signed up for that for $4.99 a month. and they've been sending that money. Now, I appreciate it. But if that person is listening right now, you don't have to do that. That doesn't get you anything special. You can pay me nothing and you will still get the same stuff. So don't feel obligated to continue to do that. I'm fine, and you're not required to do that. But I do appreciate the fact that you did do it. All right. Enough bullshit. Let's get down to some emails. We've got a few of them. First one says, hello, Boomer. You think a couple of those Irish Teamsters went and had a little talk with Tubberville? Very interesting, very suspicious. Hanging in there, Z-Man. Well, what he's talking about is Tommy Tubberville was forced to break up that little blockade he had about the military promotions. Do I think it was Irish Teamsters? No, I don't. I think it was his constituents, and I think it was other Republican senators who said enough is a fuck enough. If you don't stop this, some bad shit's going to happen. I don't know what that bad shit would be, but he was clearly pressured, and he was playing this game. He accomplished nothing because the rule he wanted changed. He's upset by the fact that the military, and we'll talk more about this, the military was paying travel expenses to women in the military that needed an abortion and happened to be stationed in a state where abortion was illegal. That seems like the reasonable thing to do. These people didn't go to this location of their own accord. They were sent there. So he didn't like that rule. So he was blocking all the military promotions, which really caused a lot of problems with our military folks. It weakened our military, and it was just absolutely fucking embarrassing. Finally, he was forced to stop the blockade after 10 months. But in those 10 months, he did a lot of fucking damage, and there should be some accountability for it. Will there be accountability? Probably not. Not to our politicians anyway, but that's over. And I think it was Republican senators and constituents who said, what the fuck are you doing? Stop that shit. All right, the next one. Boomer, I have yet to see who built the hangman scaffolding for Mike Pence. Got to be some footage somewhere. Maybe the new speaker releasing the January 6th footage will show that action. Oh crap, the faces will be redacted. Again, another story I'm going to get into. Mike Johnson came out and said he's releasing more of the January 6th tapes, but first he's got to hire people, pay them with our taxes to blur out the faces so the DOJ can't get them. Interesting, because that makes him an accessory after the fact. That's highly illegal. I think Mike's going to have some people talking to him too. All right. I still have this problem breathing out of my nose, so I got spit going all over the place, so I apologize, but the fuck are you going to do? Anyway, next one comes from Craig. He says, hey, Mike, I'm really enjoying the podcast lately, especially when you put that Trump humper in his place. Anyway, I'm sure you saw where MAGA moron Mike Johnson openly admitted to wanting to hide faces of the people on the additional footage of the January 6th riot so they won't get in trouble. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how the DOJ might handle the Speaker of the House openly obstructing justice. Thanks for doing the podcast, even though you've been sick. Best wishes, Craig. Yeah, again, that's a story we'll talk about, but basically, Mike Johnson suggested he wanted to obstruct justice by hiding these faces from the DOJ. Here's what you need to know. And apparently Mike doesn't know. It doesn't matter if he blurs out those faces. The FBI and everybody else, the DOJ in general, have all those tapes. They had them well before Mike Johnson decided to release them. So it doesn't matter what Mike Johnson did. The fact that he intended to obstruct justice and what the DOJ will do, I don't know. The DOJ is kind of busy these days. They got a lot of shit going on. I don't know that they will indict him or investigate him or not. It would be nice if they did, but I'm not sure they will. I'm not sure it's egregious enough, and there's enough evidence that his intent was to do that, even though it's obvious that his intent was to obstruct justice. I don't know what the DOJ will do. Everything they do takes so fucking long. And at this point, I hope they just focus on Donald Trump, take his ass down, and then we can worry about MAGA Mike after the fact. Next email, once again, talking about MAGA Mike. That is a big story. And as I say, we'll talk about it. This says, hey, Mike, I just saw that MAGA Mike Johnson said that they have to blur the videos from the January 6th to protect the rioters from the Justice Department. Once again, we have a Republican saying we can't trust the government. They want us to believe that all the protesters are being persecuted, that they were peaceful protests, and the protesters, liberal or Fed plants that were in league with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats. None of their alternate narratives make any sense to people with more than 5 brain cells. I'm sure the voters are paying attention and understand that the Republicans are protecting the toothless, brainless army. The January 6th committee already turned everything over to the DOJ. I think he's actually worried about us. Liberal-minded people who recognize traitors in the footage and call in tips. So far, over 900 people have either pled guilty or were found guilty. Wasn't it Lauren Boebert or Marjorie Taylor Greene, Trader Greene, who people suspected of being the person with the pipe bombs? Maybe there's evidence connecting one of them, and they're hoping to fool the voters. Tommy Tubberville caved on military promotions. It sounded like he got pressured from his own party because the Democrats were going to change the Senate rules otherwise. They didn't want the rules to change, so they forced him to cave. He got nothing except he's going to force individual votes on like 12 people being promoted to at least 4-star general. He'd hurt our military for over a year. The Republicans aren't the party of the military. They keep fucking up. Thanks, Eric. And he's absolutely right. Got one more from the Z-Man, Mike Z. Hello, Boomer. Sorry to hit you with another email. As I write this, a new scandal is developing in the Republican Party. Mikey Johnson is trying to obscure the faces and identities of the people in the January 6th footage he released to protect the people from retaliation, especially the ones involved who are running or have run for office and hold office. It's starting to look like they're trying to come up with a new conspiracy to show obscured faces are not their people. It's obvious who the people were. Trump-la-fuck Republicans. This guy is truly fucked in the head to put himself out in front deliberately trying to obstruct justice. Remember what I said in my last email, that Republicans are sitting on something really, really bad and dangerous. Where is Jack Smith? Your thoughts? And thanks again, Z-Man. Well, you make a good point. Jack Smith is kind of busy these days. He's got a few cases going on, and he's dealing with a lot of shit. But that said, we do need to see some action. I would presume we're going to start seeing some action sometime soon. I mean, we're running out of time here. And I have all the faith you could possibly have in Jack Smith that he's going to get this done. He understands the circumstances. He understands the timing. And I think that he has a plan or a strategy, and we just got to wait it out and see what happens. I know people are anxious. We've been anxious all along. When this first started, when Joe Biden took office, a lot of people thought Donald Trump will be handcuffed and dragged to jail that very day. That's not what happened. That's not how the judicial system works. It takes fucking time. It's monotonous, it's painful, but it takes time. People will come to me and say, well, when is it going to happen? Nothing's happened. Well, that's not exactly true. A lot has happened. We've got 4 indictments against Donald Trump. Nobody even thought that would happen. We've got 91 felony charges against Donald Trump. A lot of people definitely didn't think that would happen. The lawsuit in New York, nobody thought that would turn into anything. So while it's taken a long time, we have seen some progress. We have seen some movement. And hopefully that is enough to give you confidence that with a little patience, we will see the end game run, meaning Donald Trump convicted, Donald Trump thrown in jail. I got a note from somebody, another kind of a half-ass compliment. Guy wrote me a note and said, or it was on a comment on TikTok. He said, I like you, Mike. I like your show and I like your TikToks, but you saying Donald Trump will go to jail, that's absolutely stupid. So naturally, I take that with all the best intentions. And so I took time and I did a TikTok and I explained my stance on this. For somebody to say that based on knowing nothing is absolutely stupid. This gentleman who said this doesn't clearly understand the circumstances. He just reads clickbait and listens to the bullshit in the ether. When Donald Trump first got into trouble, and it looked like there were some investigations and possibly some indictments, but no indictments at that point, people talked about Donald Trump being put in jail. We all wondered, how is that possible? It's never happened with a former president. So it seems likely that it will never happen with a former president. Now you have to understand, before Donald Trump, the one president that got into a lot of trouble was Richard Nixon. Now, all Richard Nixon did, well, he did a lot. He lied to Congress. He was a bad guy. But what he did was about 10% of what Donald Trump has done. He resigns. He does the right thing. He resigns. And then Gerald Ford pardons him. And he gets off scot-free. And because of that situation, that kind of led us up to Donald Trump and why he thought he could get away with everything. Now, when he first got in trouble, I was the first one to say, I don't think he'll end up in jail because of history and what we knew at that point. But since that time, my attitude has changed about that. It's changed quite a bit. And the reason is we found out what Donald Trump was involved in. His crimes were egregious and they were vicious against this country. I mean, he tried to overthrow this country, undermine democracy, overturn elections. That's a lot bigger than sending some people to break into the Democratic headquarters. So at the time I said he wasn't going to be put in jail, I was basing it on what I knew from history. But since that time, all of this stuff has come to light. And not only is it in the investigations and in evidence, we all know about it. We've all seen evidence. And that's a problem for the government to just push it under the rug. They can't do that anymore because, well, put it this way. Back when Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon, he said it was for the best of the country. The country needed to heal. If we actually indicted a former president, it would cause divisiveness and chaos. And we just wanted the country to heal and move on. That was a questionable choice when Jerry Ford decided that. A lot of people disagreed with him, and in retrospect, that was probably the bad choice. But where we are now is a much different situation. We only knew some of what Nixon did. And what Nixon did pales in comparison to what Donald Trump has done. What he's done is 10 times worse. It's traitorous, it's treasonous, and it is an attempt to destroy our democracy and our government. So as much as there was concern about divisiveness and chaos and upheaval at the prospect of indicting Richard Nixon, the converse is true now. Because we know all that went on and we know how bad it was and how dangerous it was. For Donald Trump not to be held accountable, to not be sent to prison, we would have the same concerns that we had with Nixon if he were indicted. See, there's probably 75% of this country that don't like Donald Trump, that think he should be held accountable. What do you think is going to happen if they let him off scot-free? Well, that's not going to happen. But don't you think there's going to be a lot of people upset? A lot more people than if he's convicted. There's going to be people upset when he's convicted. 25% of his base, probably. A lot of the Republicans will be happy about it. They need to get him out of the fucking out of the narrative because they're being held down and they're taking losses because of Donald Trump. So the idea that I'm dumb for saying that he's going to go to jail, I'll just say this. I don't see any other way. Yes, it's unprecedented, but everything Donald Trump did was unprecedented. So if we have unprecedented situations, it requires unprecedented reactions. And that's what we're going to have. There's too many people that want to see him held accountable, and too many people that will be angry if he's not. And you know, we're dealing with a different class of people when we're talking Republicans and Democrats. But if Donald Trump is not held accountable, you might see some upheaval from people who aren't used to getting upset and getting violent. This is a real concern about our government, the future of our government, the future of democracy. There's a lot of people I talk to every day that are absolutely terrified at that prospect. And when people get terrified, they get dangerous. So the idea that Donald Trump will not be sent to jail, be convicted and sent to jail, seems to make no sense. The government knows what they have to deal with here. And it's no longer easier to let him go than to convict him. They've got to convict him. I wanted to bring one other thing up and then we'll take a break, but I'm getting a little agitated watching TV because every time I turn on the TV, it's the same shit. Oh my God, what happens if Donald Trump is elected president? It'll be an absolute fucking disaster. He is going to turn this into a fascist country, into Hungary. Who is he going to put on his cabinet? Stephen Miller, Steve Bannon. It's going to be disastrous. It's going to be Armageddon. And my problem with this is why do you want to, and I'm talking about the media, why do you want to insult the American people? Why do you have no faith in American people? These are the same folks that told us Donald Trump would win re-election in 2020. Well, the motherfucker lost. They were wrong. But they spent all that time on the air terrorizing people, giving people anxiety because what might happen. I knew that Donald Trump was not going to win in 2020, and he didn't. Not because I didn't want him to, or not because I had an emotional feeling about this. It's because the facts just don't bear that out. And he lost. Now, these media folks are the same people that scared everybody and said, listen, red wave's coming in 2022. Oh my God, what's going to happen when the red wave hits? Then in 2022, we don't get a red wave. Fuck, we don't even get a red ripple. So we spent all that time agonizing about shit that wasn't going to happen because the media benefits from it. It gets them an audience. It makes them money. And I'm tired of seeing this shit. Now, some people will say to me, well, they're just doing that because they want to scare people to make sure they get out and vote. And I get that. I understand the strategy there, but that's not their fucking job. The job is to give us the facts, tell us the truth, and let us decide what we need to do in order to deal with said truth. It's really annoying to me. I'm almost to the point where I'm not watching much TV news at all anymore. I used to watch it to, get tips on stories, and then I could look into those stories and then provide it to you with an in-depth look at the actual facts as opposed to what they're reporting. I can't even do that now. It's fucking annoying just watching the news media. I get a lot more tips from my compatriots who do something similar to me on TikTok. I'll hear a story and then I'll go out and try to find out what I know about the story from legitimate sources like BBC or AP or NPR, something like that. Someplace where I know they can be trusted. And I put together all the information. I figure out what the facts are, and that's what I tell you. This fucking media going out and scaring people all the time, it's really pissing me off because there is a certain faction of people that believe it and they get scared. And we've got all these people in this country that are anxious. I know because I get the DMs and I get the emails. I'm really scared. You made me feel better. I shouldn't have to make you feel better. These fuckers should be telling you the truth, and then you get to choose what's right or wrong. But I will say this, in spite of the fact that they'll say, what if, and if Donald Trump is the president, all hell will break loose. And that's true, except for the fact that Donald Trump will not be the president. He has no path to the presidency. He lost in 2020 by 7 million votes and substantially in the Electoral College. Since that time, he's gained no support, gained no votes. In fact, he's lost support and votes. So in what parallel world does it say he can win in 2024? Because people are mad at Biden? I don't think so. If you take a look at both sides and you vote Trump, you got to be in the cult. You got to be one of the 25% that are following him. Nobody with a reasonable mind would vote for Trump after all that we know about him, especially if by then he's convicted of a felony, which he most certainly will be. Donald Trump can't make it to the presidency. He won't. There's just no fucking way he makes it. And I think a lot of people in the Republican Party are not only thinking that too, but they're hoping for it. As I mentioned before, we've got the Koch brother putting all the money behind Nikki Haley. We've got other GOP donors getting behind Nikki Haley. The only way that's money well spent is if Donald Trump drops out, because Nikki Haley will never catch him in the primary voting. So the only way that money works out is if Donald Trump drops out or somehow he's stopped from running. The Koch brothers, the other donors, they either know something or kind of expect something. They're predicting something. I think all these things lining up and all the bullshit that Donald Trump has done, including taking credit for overturning Roe v. Wade, no way that motherfucker wins the presidency. Absolutely no way. So there is no reason to agonize out there. Sit back, relax, and wait for it to happen. Because trust me, it's going to happen. All right, we will take a quick break and we'll be right back. All right, we're going to talk about Tommy Tubberville, whatever the fuck his name is, in a minute. But I wanted to bring something up that happened yesterday or last night. I didn't see it, but I've read about it and I've seen clips from it. And what it amounts to is Donald Trump being on Sean Hannity. I always laugh whenever he's being interviewed by Sean Hannity, because Sean Hannity goes out of his way to save his ass, and every time Donald Trump sinks himself, he's not bright enough to see what Hannity's doing, and he always looks bad, and he looked bad last night. Hannity was trying to get him to say that he's not going to be a dictator and he's not going to go after people. So Hannity asked him directly and said, are you going to, I don't think he said dictator exactly, but that's what he was inferring. And are you going to go after people? Now, that would be an easy answer. Even if you're lying, that would be an easy answer. You just say, no, that's crazy. I'm not doing that. But do you think Donald Trump did that? No, he went off on a tangent. He diverted, he distracted, he did all that shit, but he would not answer the question about being a dictator or going after people. So we know what that means with Donald Trump. That's an answer he doesn't want to give. He'd rather make it confusing and chaotic, which he did. I think we all know that if Donald Trump became president, and I don't think that's going to be possible, but he would go after a lot of people. Revenge is his thing. Policy and and legislation. He doesn't give a shit about that because he doesn't do any of that. He will take it as a personal vendetta ride if he is president. And that's one of the reasons he will never be president. But you would think that he could get the hint from Sean Hannity when Sean Hannity's trying to bail him out. And even then, even fucking then, he couldn't see it. He couldn't do it. Guy is amazing. And the fact that people still follow him it's a mystery. How the fuck do you do that? How do you justify that? Yet there are so many people that do. All right, let's talk about Tommy Tubberville. Fuckhead. Yesterday, the Senate, in a single stroke, approved about 425 military promotions after Senator Tommy Tubberville of Alabama ended a month-long blockade of nominations over his opposition to the Pentagon abortion policy. We talked about that. Tuberville had been under pressure from members of both sides of the political aisle to end his holds as senators complained about the toll it was taking on the service members and their families and on military readiness. This had a big toll. It weakened the military. A lot of people were trying to plan their lives, get things done, knowing that if the promotion comes through, they've got to put their kids in another school district, but nobody could do that. He fucked around for 10, 11 months, and he put all these people's lives in limbo just because he wanted to prove a fucking point. Now, Chuck Schumer said, the majority leader in the Senate, thank God these military officers will now get the promotion they so rightfully earned. The action came hours after Tuberville said Tuesday he's not going to hold the promotions of these people any longer. He said holds would continue, however, for about 11 of the highest ranking military officers, those who would be promoted to what would he described as 4-star level or above. Just like Donald Trump. I'm going to give in, but I'm still going to stick it to you in the end. There were 451 military officers affected by the holds as of November 27th. It's a stance that has left the key national security positions unfilled and military families with an uncertain path forward. Now, Tuberville was blocking the nominations in opposition to Pentagon rules that, of course, allow travel reimbursement when a service member has to go out of state to get an abortion or other reproductive care. Joe Biden's administration instituted the new rules after the Supreme Court overturned the nationwide right to an abortion, and some states have limited or banned the procedure. Now, Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder said, well, certainly we're encouraged by the news. We continue to stay engaged with Senator Tuberville in the Senate directly to urge that all holds on all of our general flag officer nominations be lifted. Critics said that Tuberville's tactics were a mistake because he was blocking the promotion of people who had nothing to do with the policy he opposed. Why are we punishing American heroes who have nothing to do with the dispute, said Senator Dan Sullivan, a Republican from Alaska. Remember, we are against the Biden abortion travel policy, but why are we punishing people who have nothing to do with the dispute? And if they get confirmed, can't fix it. No one has had an answer for that question because there is no answer. For months, many of the military officers directly impacted by Tuberville's holds declined to speak out for fear any comments would be seen as political. But as the pressure on their lives and the lives of the officers serving under them increased, they began to speak about how not being able to resettle their families in new communities and how that was impacting not only them, but the military kids and spouses. Do you think Tuberville cares about the kids or spouses? I don't think so. They talked about how their most talented junior officers were going to get out of the military because of the instability they saw around them. And they talked about having to perform multiple roles because so many vacancies were putting enormous additional stress on an already overworked military. Everything that came out of that was nothing but making it more difficult for our military and our military personnel. The issue came to a head when U.S. Marine Corps Commandant General Eric Smith suffered a heart attack in October, just 2 days after he talked about the stress of the holds at a military conference. Oh, it took that, huh? We can't continue to do this to these good families. Some of these groups that are all for these holds, they haven't thought through the implication of the harm it's doing to real American families, said Senator Joni Ernst, again, a Republican from Iowa. In response to the holds, Democrats had vowed to take up a resolution that would allow the Senate to confirm groups of military nominees at once during the remainder of the congressional term. But Republicans worried that that change could erode the powers of the minority in the Senate. So we had the majority in the Senate. They said, fuck it, we're just going to change the rules. And the Republicans said, oh, okay, we'll do something. Because as much as a lot of the Republicans didn't like what Tuberville was doing, they did nothing to stop it until they were forced to, when the Democrats said, we're just going to change the rules. Now, Tuberville emerged from a closed-door luncheon with his GOP colleagues saying, all of us are against a rule change in the Senate. Yeah, I guess. He was adamant that we did the right thing for the unborn and for our military by fighting back against executive overreach. He expressed no regrets, but admitted he fell short in his effort. Fucking right, you fell short. You didn't get what you wanted. You fucking lost. The only opportunity you get the people on the left up here to listen to you in the minority is to put a hold on something. And that's what we did, Tuberville said. We didn't get the win that we wanted. We still have a bad policy, in your estimation, not the estimation of 70% of this country. And since you're a politician and you represent a constituency, you would think that would come into some of your thoughts. Now, in the end, Schumer said Tuberville ended up failing to get anything that he wanted and held it out as a warning to others who might attempt similar efforts in the future to undo policies they oppose. It's a risky strategy that will not succeed, Schumer. I hope it doesn't happen again. What he's saying is some dumb fuck Republican try to do the same thing on some other topic. And the Democrats had to spank the Republicans a little bit and scare them to death in order for them to do what's right. What does that tell you about Republicans? They had to be forced to do what was right. Now, we were talking about the House Speaker, Mike Johnson's. He said Tuesday that Republicans are blurring faces in security footage from inside the U.S. Capitol on January 6th to protect rioters from prosecution. Now, that's a hell of a thing to say for a member of Congress, the Speaker of the House, no less. I mean, that's tantamount to obstruction of justice or becoming an accessory after the fact. That's a problem when our elected officials decide to help people break the law. He said, we have to blur some of the faces of persons who participated in the events of that day because we don't want them to be retaliated against and to be charged by the DOJ. That's very clear. I think he tried to walk it back later, but what he said was very clear. His intentions were very clear, and they are criminal. The Department of Justice had long had access to the footage and used it in some of the roughly 1,200 criminal cases against people linked to the riot. So as much as he wanted to obscure the faces, it really didn't matter because the FBI already had it. What they were trying to avoid, I think, with Mike Johnson, wasn't so much the DOJ directly. They were worried about these videos getting out and somebody saying, hey, I recognize that motherfucker. I'm calling the FBI. Because that's what happened since they released the videotapes, the section they did. I think they scooped up another 100+ insurrectionists. So once again, the Republicans fuck up. Mike Johnson looks like a dolt, which he is. He's a dangerous dolt, but he's a dolt nonetheless. So Mike Johnson is trying to walk back things, and even when he does that, he fucks up. This is essentially the Republican Party right now. Over and above everything else I talked about, we know they continually fuck up. They continually embarrass themselves. So how does a party like that win the presidential election? It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. Now, Johnson's comment is a remarkable statement of sympathy for supporters of then President Donald Trump, who illegally entered a federal building, broke into it, turned it into a violent attack. Though prosecutors already have the video, blurring people's faces could prevent amateur investigators, as I said, see this and then send info into the FBI. Now, in a follow-up statement on Tuesday, a Johnson spokesperson said, blurring faces would prevent all forms of retaliation against private citizens from any non-governmental actors. Now, yeah, well, we just don't want to get them beat up. Sorry, Democrats don't do that. That's you, motherfuckers. Now, shortly after becoming Speaker in October, Johnson announced the Republicans would release thousands of hours of footage from security cameras, fulfilling a pledge he made to the far-right flank of the House GOP conference. The video has previously been available to criminal defendants and reporters by request. Johnson initially said the footage would allow people to see for themselves what happened that day, so that the public would not have to rely upon interpretation of a small group of government officials. Well, he forgets, we did see a lot of the video. And what we saw in the video was fucking undeniable. It was an attempt of a coup. It was violent. It was vicious. We've seen the video. We've seen enough to decide what the fuck it is. But you see what the Republicans are doing here. They're doing the only thing they can do these days. They don't have truth, facts, or justice behind them. And so they're trying to manipulate the court of public opinion. That's what they're doing all along here with the investigations into Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and all this shit they're doing. They know they can't win in court, so they're trying to get people on their side. Guess what? Not fucking working. Nothing they do works. Now, conspiracy theorists and some Republican lawmakers have pointed to video snippets as evidence that it was actually the Justice Department that orchestrated the riot. That's the most ridiculous thing. Even the Speaker of the House said, well, they were FBI agents. Well, I thought they were Antifa. Which one is it? It's whichever one you can sell, because neither one is saleable. Several lawmakers claimed that the video showed a Trump supporter flashing a badge at the Capitol, for instance. The object in the man's hand turned it out to be a vaping device. Please, motherfucker. Matt Gaetz, who claimed from the House floor on the day of the attack that it had actually been perpetrated by leftists in disguise, led the push for releasing the footage. That's not what happened. We've got, 1,000 people that have been convicted? Not one of them was a Democrat. Not one of them. Johnson said Tuesday that Republicans trust the American people to draw their own conclusions. Really? You mean like an election for the president in 2020? You trust the people? No, you don't trust the people. You don't trust anything that doesn't go your way. Republicans think it would be inappropriate for members of the public to use footage to try to identify suspects. Well, see, that's where the confusion is. You're putting these videos out to affect public opinion, but you don't want the public to see who did it. You see where the confusion is here? You see where the contradiction is? Jesus fucking Christ. Barry Loudermilk said, when these people arrive, they see the doors open and Capitol Police just standing there with people walking in. That was from Barry Loudermilk. There's too many people out there just trying to go after anyone who's there. Here's the thing. If you were in that morass on January 6th, you're guilty. You're part of this mob, part of this crowd. You worked there with good intentions. Now let's talk about Barry Loudermilk. Barry Loudermilk is the guy we have on video who was giving tours to insurrectionists. So what he has to say is not trustable. It's just not. It's funny. I was talking to my wife who works with an airline, and she had somebody come up, and immediately it was flagged, um, and they had to call the TSA down to check this guy out. And my wife knew exactly what it was, but one of her colleagues says, why do we have to do that? And the guy just looked at her and said, well, I was someplace I shouldn't have been. There's a lot of ramifications for people who were there, whether you broke into the Capitol or not. You were part of the mob. You were part of the effects on how this had on Mike Pence, on the legislature, people having to hide. If you were in the mix in the Capitol, you're fucking guilty. Now, if you're standing out on the sidelines and whatever, you're culpable to a certain extent. But if you weren't involved in the action, you're just guilt by association. Now, there was another story that came out yesterday that I wanted to talk about. President Biden was talking to some donors in Boston on Tuesday, and he said that he might not be running for re-election had Donald Trump not entered the race. He said, if Trump wasn't running, I'm not sure I'd be running, Biden said, according to the reporters present at the event, but we cannot let him win. A lot of people were surprised about that comment. I was not, because you understand in 2020 when he ran, he kind of said the same thing. He was older at that point, and he says, I think I need to run because I'm the one person that can beat Donald Trump. I have the experience, I have the time, I have the track record. I'm going to run because I believe I can beat Donald Trump. And God damn it if he didn't. He also said that he would be a transitional president. And when I heard that, I said that here and on TikTok, I think that means he's only going to be there for one term. That he understands he's getting too old to be doing this. He'll do this for one term, get us on track, and then we can get some young people or younger people running the show. And I think that was his intention after he was elected in 2020. But now that Donald Trump is back in the race, at least for the moment, he feels kind of the same way. I mean, you're going to be 82 years old. I don't want to fucking work when I'm 82. Hell, I didn't want to work when I was 62. So I think he feels like it's important that he stay in the race because he's been a successful president. He's already beaten Donald Trump, and that he needs to get to 2024 to beat Donald Trump again and end it completely at that point. So I think that's why he's running. Now, if he should, well, he's going to win in 2024. Now, if after that, at some point, he decides he's going to retire, that wouldn't surprise me. And that would make Kamala Harris the president. I wouldn't be at all surprised he did that. As I've said before in the podcast, all I want him to do is get to the election, make it to the inauguration, and then after that, we can deal with whatever we have to deal with. Take it a step at a time. As long as the Democrats are in control, we'll be good. If Joe decides to step down after the 2024 election and Kamala become the president, cool. I have no problem with Kamala. She's not as experienced as Joe Biden, but at that point, hopefully we have enough power in the House and the Senate, and of course in the Oval Office, that we can get things done and bury the fucking Republican Party. But that's why Joe's running again. I don't think he had any intention or even wanted to run again in 2024. He just feels like, well, like he said in 2020, I want to save the soul of America. And he wasn't wrong. I mean, during Trump's administration, we almost lost our soul when Donald Trump was in office. Now, Biden didn't immediately elaborate on that thought process, but the admission should come as much of a shock. It shouldn't come as much of a shock, as I said. Now, somebody's asked me, they said, now what happens if Donald Trump doesn't end up being the nominee? Would Biden then step aside? And my thought on that is no. You're too deep into this. We've got the campaign, we've got the process going. Just because Donald Trump gets dumped, and I think he will, I don't think Joe Biden will step away. That wouldn't make any sense. That wouldn't be good for the Democratic Party. He's in the race. As long as everything is fine, he should continue with the race, win the election, and then after that, we can decide what to do. Take it a step at a time. So that's where we stand with Joe Biden at this point, and it'll be fine. He will win, and Donald Trump will be convicted of a crime, and he's done. I mean, if you don't believe in Joe Biden, here's what you got to understand. Joe Biden received 81 million votes, the most votes for any president in history. Now, not all of that was because Joe Biden is such a wonderful candidate. It was because people were scared of getting Donald Trump back in office. That fear is still there. Joe Biden has a track record. He's been a good president. He's accomplished a lot of things, unlike Donald Trump, who accomplished nothing. And Joe Biden, whether you like his age or not, and I don't, but whether you like his age or not, he is the best option, best known option to beat Donald Trump. And beating Donald Trump or any other Republican in 2024 is absolutely essential. If we don't do that, we're in a fucking world of hurt. But I'm not really concerned about it because I know that there is no Republican that can beat any Democrat for that fucking matter in the 2024 presidential election, especially after all we see over the next 12 months. All right, we got one more story here. I guess one more. Republicans in the House are accusing Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis of colluding with the House Select Committee that investigated the Capitol riots. Now, I don't doubt that the January 6th committee supplied some documents and some evidence to Fani Willis. They certainly did to the DOJ, and they said they'd give it out to anybody. In fact, they made it all publicly available. So the idea that Fani Willis has that isn't surprising. The House Judiciary Committee Republicans announced Tuesday that Representatives Jim Jordan and Barry Tour Guide Loudermilk were launching a probe into the prosecutor leading the charge in Donald Trump's Georgia election racketeering case. Jordan and Loudermilk launched inquiry into Fani Willis colluding with the January 6th committee. That was put out on Twitter, not calling them X. They're not long for this world anyway. They go on to say, we have learned that Willis's office coordinated its investigative actions with the partisan select committee. Jordan and Loudermilk each sent letters demanding documents Willis received from the January 6th Select Committee by December 19th at 5 p.m., copies shared on social media. Jordan attaches a December 2021 letter Willis sent to the committee acknowledging her criminal investigation and requesting access to relevant records, then admits he has no idea if the committee obliged. And it's certainly not illegal if they did. Although it's not clear what records, if any, you obtained, Jordan writes to Willis, this new information raises additional questions relevant to the committee's oversight of your politically motivated prosecution of a former president of the United States. Political, in spite of the fact there's all kinds of evidence. Your investigation of Joe Biden is also political, but you have no evidence. This story probably sounds familiar to you because this story played out a while back. You may have forgotten, but I'll remind you. You remember Jim Jordan tried to do the same thing to Alvin Bragg up in the Manhattan district. I want to see all your stuff. You need to testify. You're in trouble. And you know what Alvin Bragg did? Alvin Bragg said, pound sand and fuck yourself. You have no authority. You have no jurisdiction here. Go a fucking way. And you know what Jim Jordan did? He went a fucking way. And if you think that Fani Willis is going to handle this any different, you're crazy. That's not the way it's going to play out. I don't think he should be fucking with Fonnie Willis, because Fonnie Willis might find a way to go after him for obstruction of justice. This is Jim Jordan. It goes back to what I said before. It's not about what's real, true, or lawful. It's about public opinion. I'm going to say Fonnie Willis is politically motivated, and then everybody will believe it, and everybody will hate her, and Donald Trump will win. Well, that's absolutely ridiculous. It won't work. It hasn't worked. It's stupid, but it's not beyond Jim Jordan or Loudermill, the tour guide. So you're going to hear about this, but it's not a big deal. They're not going to. I'm sure Fonnie Willis may or may not even respond to it, because she's not required to. They have no jurisdiction. Congress has no business going to a state district attorney and demanding anything. So I don't know what they're trying to play. They're trying to just make it sound like Fonnie is corrupt and hoping people will believe it, but nobody fucking believed it. It didn't hurt Alvin Bragg. It's not going to hurt Fonnie Willis. It's just another futile attempt to try to make themselves look good. So yeah, I'm not too worried about what's going on there, but it's typical of the Republicans. One more thing I want to talk about. Christopher Kise, the attorney representing former President Donald Trump in the New York civil fraud case, tried to throw another wrench in the works of the justice system currently ensnaring his client. However, the judge overseeing the case appeared to reject this argument outright. They keep making appeals, they keep making motions, and every time they get kicked in the ass. Now, MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin tweeted on Tuesday that Kise did a 180 on a statement yesterday in which he said he wouldn't play to a file motion attempt to delay Trump's upcoming testimony in the case until the appeals challenging Judge Engoron's gag order had been exhausted. Now, Rubin tweeted an exchange she had with Kise in which she asked if Kise planned to ask Judge Engoron to pause the trial so that Trump's appellate rights can be vindicated. Kise indicated he didn't plan to do so, telling the reporter she was probably smart enough to know where that would land, and that he tried not to engage in futile efforts. Like I said, it's all fucking futile. But on Tuesday, Rubin tweeted that Kise still asked and got a nice try from Engoron. Trump is still appealing Judge Engoron's gag order, which he imposed in response to the former president's constant flurry of attacks against law clerk Allison Greenfield. Trump's post about Greenfield reportedly resulted in Clerk getting a deluge of death threats from Trump supporters, many of them anti-Semitic in nature. She happens to be a woman of Jewish faith. So you remember when they made an appeal to keep the stay on, and Letitia James wanted to take the stay off. It went to a court, and they took the stay off. So they're upset about that. They made an urgent appeal the other day to put the stay back on. They failed there. The appeal's not going to work. The gag is going to stay on. They're just trying to juggle too many fucking things. And they're just flailing right now. Everything they do, they fail. Everything they do, they're embarrassed. They are trying anything. You can see that they're desperate because of the stupid things they do. They know in their own hearts that none of this is going to work, but they have to appease the fucking orange orangutan. They got to make him feel good. And why they're still at this stage, I don't know. I don't know why people are afraid of Donald Trump, but he is the weakest he's ever been, and he's about ready to go down for the third time. He's going to be fucking done here soon. So I don't know what they're thinking or why they're thinking it, but they do. And it'll play out, and the appeal will be rejected, and then they'll be crying and whining about something else. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day. And of course, We'll be back tomorrow.